The rising sun filtered through the mountains of the Sierra Norte of Oaxaca, dyeing the cobblestone streets of Tlacolula de Matamoros golden. In the Jimenez mechanic shop, located on the corner of Hidalgo and Morelos streets, Carmen Vega prepared to face the biggest challenge of her life: getting the 1969 sky blue Mustang to run, a car that had defeated 5 generations of expert mechanics for 30 years. Carmen, 23, had raven black hair tied in a thick braid that reached her waist, and her honey-colored eyes reflected a determination she had inherited from her great-great-grandmother, Esperanza Morales, a legendary Zapotec woman in the region for her supernatural ability to repair any mechanism without formal training. Carmen's hands, slender but surprisingly strong, had the same sensitivity that had allowed Esperanza to fix 19th-century pocket watches, 1920s Singer sewing machines, and 1940s tube radios, all simply by touching them and listening to what they needed. It's as if machines whispered their secrets to her, her 82-year-old grandmother Soledad used to say, a woman whose memories went back to stories her own grandmother told her about the family's mystical gifts. Esperanza could touch a broken device and know exactly what screw was loose, what wire was disconnected, what part needed oil. It was as if she could feel the machine's pain. The gift had skipped generations until it reached Carmen, who since the age of 8 had shown an inexplicable connection with all kinds of mechanisms. When she was 12, she had repaired Doña Petra's nixtamal mill simply by listening to the irregular sound it made when grinding corn. At 16, she had managed to get the ice machine at El Zapotal canteen to work, which had frustrated 3 specialized technicians from Oaxaca City. At 19, she had repaired the organ of the San Jeronimo Church, an 1890 German instrument that had been silent for 5 years. But the Mustang represented something completely different. It was not just a broken machine. It was the symbol of wounded family pride, a constant reminder that even the best mechanics have limits. The 5 Jimenez brothers, Aurelio, Abiod Benito, Crisanto, Damian, and Evaristo, had built their reputation over 4 decades as the best mechanics in the entire Zapotec region, capable of resurrecting any vehicle regardless of its condition. The Mustang had destroyed that reputation, becoming an obsession that had consumed their resources, their time, and their confidence. "Carmen, we've tried everything," her uncle Aurelio would tell her, a 68-year-old man, with hands the size of shovels and a gray beard that always smelled of engine grease and delicate cigarettes. "We've replaced the entire engine twice, changed the transmission, renovated the entire electrical system, installed a new fuel injection system, replaced every screw, every wire, every hose. That car has more new parts than a dealership car." Carmen approached the Mustang, which dominated the center of the workshop like an altar dedicated to frustration. Its sky blue paint, though faded by time, still retained the elegance that had captivated her grandfather Roberto when he bought it in 1994. The vehicle was a 1969 Mustang Mach 1, equipped with a 3 Cleveland V8 engine, a 4-speed manual transmission, and all the original details that made it a true automotive jewel. "Tell me the complete story," Carmen asked her Uncle Benito, known for his photographic memory and his obsession with technical details. From the moment Grandpa bought it until the last time they tried to fix it. Benito sighed deeply, as if he were about to recite a funeral prayer. "Your grandfather Roberto bought it in May 1994 from a retired American who lived in Puerto Escondido. The gringo had kept the car in perfect condition, all services up to date, complete documentation. He even had the original owner's manual and the invoices for every repair since 1969. Did it work well when he brought it? Carmen asked, gently placing her left hand on the Mustang's hood, as if greeting an old friend. Perfectly, Benito confirmed. Roberto drove it 600 kilometers from Puerto Escondido here without problems. For almost a year, he used it every Sunday to go to Mass with your grandmother Remedios, and on Saturdays to drive around the nearby towns. It was his pride, his connection to the modern world. Carmen closed her eyes and kept her hand on the hood. Her uncles had learned to respect these moments of apparent meditation, although they didn't fully understand what happened during them. Carmen seemed to be listening to something no one else could perceive, as if the vehicle were telling her its own version of the story. When exactly did it stop working? She asked without opening her eyes. It was a Tuesday, March 14th, 1995, responded Crisanto, the electrical systems specialist, a thin 61-year-old man with thick glasses. Your grandfather had left early for the Tlacolula market to buy chilies and spices for the restaurant. When he returned, around 10 in the morning, he parked the Mustang as always, but when he tried to turn it off and turn it back on, to put it in the workshop, the engine simply didn't respond. It didn't even try to start? Carmen asked, opening her eyes and walking slowly around the vehicle. Nothing, replied Damian, the fourth brother, a transmission specialist. Not even the sound of the starter motor. It was as if the car had decided to take a nap and never wake up again. Carmen stopped next to the driver's door and observed the inside of the vehicle. The black vinyl seats were perfectly preserved. The dashboard maintained its original shine, and the three-spoke steering wheel seemed to patiently await the hands of a driver who never arrived. "What have you specifically done to repair it?" she asked, although she knew the answer by heart from the countless family conversations on the subject. Evaristo, the youngest of the brothers, spoke. At 54, he was considered the most innovative of the group, always willing to try new techniques and technologies. "We have replaced the entire ignition system 6 times. We tried original distributors, electronic distributors, computer ignition systems. We changed the original carburetor for a new one, then for a rebuilt one, then installed a modern fuel injection system. We rebuilt the engine from scratch in 1998, Aurelio added. Every piston, every valve, every gasket was like new, but it still wouldn't start. In 2003, we changed the entire transmission," Damian continued. "We thought maybe the problem was in the clutch or in some connection between the engine and the transmission. We renovated the entire electrical system in 2007, Crisanto added. New wires, new fuses, new battery, new alternator. We even brought in an automotive electrical systems specialist from Mexico City. And in 2012, we brought in the famous Roberto Mustang Hernandez," Benito finished. "A guy who specializes exclusively in classic Mustangs with over 40 years of experience. He was here for 2 full weeks, checked every millimeter of the car, consulted with other experts by phone, even contacted a car museum in Detroit. His conclusion was that the car should work perfectly." Carmen leaned into the engine compartment, her eyes scanning each component with an intensity that unsettled her uncles. She wasn't looking for something specific. Rather, she seemed to be feeling the personality of each part, as if she could perceive the emotions of the metal and wires. "Have you checked the starter solenoid?" she asked suddenly. "Of course," Aurelio replied. "We've changed it 4 times. We have original Motorcraft solenoids, aftermarket solenoids, rebuilt solenoids. They all work perfectly when we test them separately." Carmen extended her hand towards the current solenoid, but did not touch it immediately. First, she closed her eyes again, as if tuning a very subtle radio frequency. When she finally made contact with the cylindrical metal piece, an expression of understanding lit up her face. "This solenoid works," she murmured, "but it doesn't work as it should." Her uncles approached, intrigued by the unusual specificity of her diagnosis. Carmen had the disconcerting ability to make very precise technical statements on subjects she had never formally studied, and her intuition had an impressive track record of accuracy. "What do you mean?" Benito asked, genuinely confused. Carmen kept her hand on the solenoid, eyes closed, as if reading information in Braille. The solenoid is sending current to the starter motor, but not with the correct intensity. There is something inside it that has changed over time, something that cannot be seen from the outside. "But we've tested them, Carmen," Crisanto insisted. "When we apply 12 volts, the solenoid activates the starter motor perfectly. The amps are correct. The resistance is normal." "Yes, but the strength of the internal spring has changed," Carmen explained, with a certainty that surprised even herself. "It's not about electricity, it's about mechanics. The spring that controls the movement of the internal piston has fatigued in a very specific way. It still works, but it doesn't exert the exact pressure the starter motor needs to work at 100%. The five brothers exchanged astonished glances. In more than 40 years of combined mechanical experience, they had never considered that an internal spring could subtly tire in such a way that it would cause an almost imperceptible failure. "How can you know something so specific?" Damian asked, with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Carmen smiled shyly. "I can't explain it with words. It's like when you listen to your favorite song, but someone is playing it on a slightly out-of-tune instrument. Technically, it's still the same song, but something in your ear tells you it's not perfect." "But even if you're right," Evaristo intervened, "that solenoid is original from 1969. Motorcraft stopped manufacturing that specific part in 1975. Even if we found a used one in a junkyard, it would be the same age and have the same problem." Carmen went to the corner of the workshop where her deceased father had kept his special tools, a set of precision instruments that had belonged to her grandfather and great-grandfather, some so old they looked like museum pieces. Among them were traditional forging tools that the family had used for generations for artisanal blacksmithing, including a small anvil, hammers of different weights, and specialized tongs for working precious metals. "I'm going to make a new spring," Carmen announced with a calm that contrasted with the magnitude of what she was proposing. Her uncles watched her with a mixture of concern and fascination. Aurelio was the first to express his doubts. "Carmen, manufacturing a solenoid spring requires very specific knowledge of metallurgy, heat treatment, special alloys. It's not something that can be done by hand." "I know," Carmen replied, although technically she shouldn't know anything about metallurgy. "But I also know I can do it. My great-great-grandmother Esperanza made springs for pocket watches without having any idea what metallurgy was." For the next few days, Carmen immersed herself in a project that seemed to combine modern science with ancestral techniques in a way that defied all logic. First, she carefully disassembled the original solenoid, studying each component with the patience of an archaeologist examining an invaluable artifact. The internal spring, a small spiral-shaped piece of metal barely 4 centimeters long, had been made with a special steel alloy that allowed it to maintain its elasticity for decades of use. But the climatic conditions of Oaxaca, the humidity of the rainy season, the extreme heat of the dry season, the temperature changes had gradually altered its molecular structure in a way so subtle that it was practically invisible. "It's as if the metal has memory," Carmen explained to her cousin Esperanza, a young teacher who had come to visit her after classes. "It remembers all the years of work, all the starts, all the efforts, and now it's tired, but it can't tell anyone it's tired." Carmen began her manufacturing process with special alloy wire that she had obtained through a jewelry material supplier in Mexico City. But her true innovation came from a technique she had learned by observing her grandmother, Soledad, create traditional Zapotec jewelry using methods that had been passed down from generation to generation. Instead of using modern industrial techniques, Carmen decided to work the metal using traditional forging methods that had been perfected over centuries in the artisanal workshops of Oaxaca. She built an oak charcoal oven in the backyard of her house, reaching temperatures she controlled not with modern instruments, but with the inherited wisdom of generations of traditional metallurgists. "Look, mijita," she told her grandmother Soledad as she watched the process. "Metal is like people. If you heat it too fast, it becomes fragile. If you don't heat it enough, it never really changes. You have to find the exact point where the metal wants to transform." For 5 full days, Carmen worked the special alloy wire, heating it in the charcoal oven until it acquired a specific cherry red color that she intuitively recognized as the perfect point to work it. Then she carefully hammered it on the small anvil, shaping it into a spiral with a precision that seemed impossible for someone without formal training in metallurgy. But the most crucial process was tempering, cooling the metal in a controlled way to give it the exact mechanical properties it needed. Carmen developed a technique that combined filtered well water with castor oil, creating a cooling mixture that allowed the metal to acquire the necessary hardness without becoming brittle. "It's impossible," Benito murmured when Carmen showed him the finished spring. "The alloy you're using shouldn't have the necessary fatigue resistance for this application. It should break after a few cycles." "This spring is different," Carmen replied, holding the small metal piece in her hands as if it were a precious jewel. "The forging technique has changed its internal structure. It's more flexible than the original, but also more resistant." What Carmen had achieved was technically impossible according to modern metallurgy standards. She had created an alloy that combined the strength of steel with the flexibility of copper, using temperatures and cooling techniques that did not appear in any technical manual. The result was a spring that not only matched the original specifications, but significantly exceeded them. "How do you know it's going to work?" she asked, examining the spring with a magnifying glass. "Because I feel it," Carmen simply replied. "It's as if the spring is telling me it's ready." The moment of truth arrived on a Saturday morning. It was market day in Tlacolula, and the streets were full of vendors, buyers, and the characteristic bustle of one of Oaxaca's oldest traditions. The entire extended family had gathered in the workshop, the 5 brothers with their wives and children, several cousins, neighbors, and even Father Miguel from the San Jeronimo Church, who had come to bless the process. Carmen carefully installed the new spring in the original solenoid, sealing the piece with a precision that impressed her uncles. Her movements were confident and deliberate, as if she had performed this operation hundreds of times before. Then she reconnected the solenoid to the Mustang's electrical system, checking each connection twice. "Are you sure it's going to work?" asked her Aunt Rosa, Aurelio's wife, a woman who had witnessed too many frustrated hopes related to the Mustang over the past 30 years. "Yes," Carmen replied with absolute certainty. "It's going to work." She approached the driver's door, opened the door with an almost ceremonial reverence, and sat behind the wheel. The Mustang's interior smelled of old leather and years of accumulated hope. Carmen inserted the original key into the ignition, the same key her grandfather Roberto had used 30 years ago. For a moment that seemed eternal, the workshop fell into such a deep silence that one could hear the collective heartbeat of all present. Carmen closed her eyes briefly, as if sending a silent prayer to the spirit of her grandfather and her great-great-grandmother Esperanza. Then she turned the key. The Mustang's engine instantly roared to life with a deep, powerful sound that resonated not only throughout the workshop, but throughout the entire block. It was a sound that had been absent for 30 years, but now returned with a force that seemed to compensate for decades of silence. The reaction was instantaneous and emotional. The five brothers, men hardened by decades of mechanical work and accustomed to controlling their emotions, embraced each other with tears streaming down their cheeks. Their wives cried with joy and relief. The children ran around the vehicle, shouting and applauding. The neighbors who had come as spectators joined the spontaneous celebration. But Carmen remained seated in the driver's seat, her hands firmly placed on the steering wheel, feeling every vibration of the engine as if it were the heartbeat of a heart that had come back to life. Her eyes filled with tears, not only for the technical success, but for the deep connection she felt with all the generations of women in her family who had worked with their hands to create, repair, and improve the world around them. "How did you know?" her Uncle Aurelio asked her, approaching the vehicle with a mixture of admiration and awe that he could not hide. Carmen smiled through her tears. "I can't explain it with words, Uncle. It's as if the car had been waiting for me all its life, as if it knew that I could understand what it really needed." In the following hours, the Mustang was subjected to every imaginable test. Carmen drove it through the cobblestone streets of Tlacolula, climbed the surrounding hills, put it in reverse, tested all the speeds of the manual transmission. The engine responded perfectly to every demand, as if it had been waiting 30 years to show what it was capable of. "It's incredible," said Roberto Mustang Hernandez, the specialist from Mexico City, who had returned especially to witness the miracle. "In 45 years working with Mustangs, I had never seen such a specific and effective repair. That young woman has a gift that cannot be taught in any school." The news of Carmen's success spread quickly throughout the Zapotec region and beyond. In the following weeks, people from towns as far away as Ixtlan de Juarez and Juchitán de Zaragoza began to bring their most problematic vehicles to the workshop, specifically requesting the services of the young woman who had achieved the impossible. Carmen discovered that her gift was not limited to a single extraordinary case. She had a genuine ability to identify mechanical problems that had eluded experienced technicians for years. A month after the success with the Mustang, she had repaired a 1974 Volkswagen sedan that had defeated 5 different mechanics. She had made a 1968 John Deere tractor work that had been broken down for 3 years and had solved an electrical problem in a passenger bus that had frustrated the transportation company's technicians for months. "Carmen doesn't repair machines," her grandmother Soledad told the reporters, who began to visit Tlacolula to document the phenomenon. "Carmen communicates with them. It's as if she can feel what the machines feel, understand what they need to be happy." 2 months after the success with the Mustang, Carmen received a phone call that would change her life forever. On the other end of the line was Eduardo Maldonado, one of the most important classic car collectors in Latin America, who had heard about her work through the international network of vintage car enthusiasts. "Miss Vega," he said, with a voice that combined respect and urgency, "I have a collection of 47 classic automobiles at my hacienda near Puebla. Many of them have defeated the best specialists in Mexico and the United States. I would like to hire you to check them." "But Mr. Maldonado," Carmen replied, "I don't have formal certifications. I haven't studied at any technical school." "Precisely why I need you," Maldonado replied. "You have something that cannot be taught in any institution, an intuitive understanding of machines that transcends traditional technical knowledge." Carmen accepted the project, but insisted that her 5 uncles be part of the team. The success with the Mustang had shown that the combination of her extraordinary intuition with her uncle's solid technical experience, created a practically unstoppable team. The project with the Maldonado collection became the catalyst that transformed the Jimenez workshop from a local family business into an internationally recognized destination for classic car restoration. Carmen established herself as the technical leader of the team, but kept her uncles as essential collaborators, respecting and valuing their decades of experience while contributing her unique and irreplaceable perspective. Carmen can diagnose problems that we would never see, Aurelio explained to clients who traveled from countries as far away as Argentina and the United States to bring their vehicles to the workshop. We know how engines work, but she knows how engines feel. 6 months after the success with the Mustang, the Jimenez workshop had expanded its facilities 3 times, had hired 12 additional mechanics, and had a 6-month waiting list for Carmen's services. But despite the commercial success, Carmen maintained her rituals and her connection with family traditions. Every morning, before starting work, she would approach the Mustang, which now occupied a place of honor in the workshop and had become the unofficial mascot of the business, and placed her hand on the hood exactly as she had done the day she first diagnosed it. The Jimenez workshop was a ritual that connected her not only with the vehicle, but with the deep understanding that her gift was part of something larger than herself. The Mustang taught me that machines are not just metal and wires, Carmen told engineering students who came to observe her working methods. They are entities that have personality, history, emotions. When you understand that, you can communicate with them in a way that goes beyond traditional mechanics. The story of the sky blue Mustang had become a legend told in mechanic shops throughout Mexico and beyond. But for Carmen, the true meaning of what she had achieved was not technical or commercial, but deeply personal and spiritual. She had connected with a family tradition that went back generations, honoring the memory of her great-great-grandmother Esperanza, and validating the wisdom of all the women in her family who had worked with their hands to create beauty and functionality in the world. A year after the initial success, Carmen had expanded her skills beyond automobiles. She had repaired industrial machinery that had defeated teams of engineers. She had solved problems in irrigation systems that had frustrated specialized technicians, and had even worked with antique clocks and musical instruments, directly connecting with the legacy of her great-great-grandmother. Carmen represents the evolution of a tradition, wrote Dr. Manuel Esparza, professor of cultural anthropology at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, in an academic article about the phenomenon. She demonstrates that ancestral wisdom can find new ways of expressing itself in each generation, adapting to the needs of the modern world without losing its fundamental essence. But perhaps the most powerful testament to Carmen's impact came from her own uncles, men who had dedicated their lives to mechanical work and who had seen in her something that transcended their own experience. Carmen taught us that being a mechanic is not just knowing how to fix things, Aurelio reflected during an interview for a specialized magazine on classic cars. It's knowing how to listen, how to feel, how to connect with the essence of what you're trying to repair. We had the knowledge, but she had the wisdom. Every afternoon when the workshop closed and the last clients had left, Carmen would take a few minutes to walk around the Mustang, watching the sunset light reflect on its sky blue paint. It was a moment of contemplation that connected her with the miracle she had achieved and with the responsibilities she had assumed. The roar of the Mustang's engine every morning had become something more than the sound of a vehicle functioning correctly. It was the sound of renewed tradition, of ancestral wisdom finding new forms of expression, of a young Zapotec woman demonstrating that the most extraordinary gifts often come from the most unexpected places. In the heart of Oaxaca, where mountains hold ancient secrets and expert hands continue to create wonders, the 1969 sky blue Mustang continues to run perfectly, reminding all who hear it that some success stories transcend logic and become legends that inspire future generations. The story of Carmen Vega and the Mustang that defied 5 expert mechanics for 30 years had become more than a local anecdote. It was a reminder that intuition, tradition, and determination can achieve what pure technique cannot, and that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles arise from the perfect combination of ancestral wisdom and the needs of the modern world.